Life satisfaction in adulthood is a skill set. You might not be happy all the time, but you could still experience joy. And it's a skill set to learn as an adult, like everything else. And if you prioritize that among with everything else, then little by little baby steps, you get to experience it. I don't think it will happen that one day you will wake up and you will be happy. And if as an adult, you're waiting for that day, it may never come. There's a generational act of service that I believe in, but I also don't want to make it as if like anybody can wake up and all of a sudden decide to be happy. But I'm also a firm believer that a lot of it as an adult is a choice that at some point you have to make in life to be happy.
Welcome to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we help mentor you into becoming a more successful version of yourself. We do this through giving you access to mentors you typically would never have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their experiences, their life-changing events, their fields of expertise, and most importantly, their purpose. My name is Harry Goldberg, husband to an incredible woman, father of 2 amazing daughters, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast. And now, just before we learn from yet another exceptional guest, if you find value from these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe below, leave a review. It really does make a difference. And of course, share with someone else who's going to find value. Now, listen in, pay attention, take some notes, enjoy. Let's begin. Pantea, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you. Okay, so we finally got time to record this, and for the benefit of the listeners, really simple. Pantea's journey is one from Iranian immigrant to one of both career and parenting success, and I'll let Pantea describe all of that and from her journey. But before we dive into your journey, how do you define success?
If I want to define it in one sentence, I borrowed from my father. He said, when you are at peace, then you're successful. But how you get there is, like you said, is a journey. That's how I would define it in one sentence.
What does it mean when you're at peace? What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I can define it against what not being at peace means. A lot of years of my life. I think a lot of it comes from balance. So, for example, career-wise, I consider myself successful now, because on daily basis, my potential and my capability, mostly capabilities are on par with my responsibilities. And I carry around these responsibilities and I keep growing until I outgrow the position I have in terms of learning. And I feel like I am, okay, I delivered what I wanted to deliver. And that's only then that I start getting restless because the balance is off. I think at home, I am very clear about what I don't want to do and what I do want to do. And I'm very, very big advocate of delegation and outsourcing. And for example, one of my balance point is spending time with my daughter every night between, say, 6 to 9 p.m. I'm very clear that I'm okay working until then and delegating a lot of the tasks. But when that 6 to 9 is disturbed, then I'm thrown off balance. Similarly with my husband, like I have this clear, precious things that I want to make sure they happen. When those don't happen, then I fall off balance. So a lot of it is that. And then an undercurrent of all of it, and we're going to get to it probably later, is a sense of continuous service. And when I was young, I wanted to be the head of World Bank or head of UN. None of those happened. No, I haven't even entered the UN in my life. I've just seen the building. But I resigned to the fact that I might not become that. And then I have all these very, very little elements in my life that keep me in touch with my community and then allow me, or also the way I show up to work every day, that allow me to do thousands acts of micro kindness. And that also brings...
Do you say thousands of acts of micro kindness?
Micro kindness. Like every time I show up to my community or for work, I show up with a act of service in mind, and I try to do something, even if it's very little. And overall, that brings a level of balance to my life.
Yeah, so some of the people listening to this might be thinking, that sounds amazing, right? Micro kindness, thousands of acts of service throughout your day, in every single moment that you're going to. Can you give some examples of that? But maybe some of both the big and small. I imagine people resonate mostly with the big, and then maybe kind of resonate with some of the small, and then where, or like all those along the spectrum, because some of those examples might help.
Sure. So I don't have a very big ones because by definitions they're micro, right?
Yeah, of course.
But first of all, I've always been online present. I started writing, but the scope, I don't want to the scope, the vision behind it is that when you're in 20s, you're kind of more on the receiving end of everything, right? You need guidance, you need mentorship, you need to figure yourself out. So I wrote blogs since 2004. I'm that ancient. And then I kept writing and I migrated to Instagram, and then until 2020 I was writing in Instagram, and I transformed, like the way I was writing is like, I'm a teacher at heart, so when I learn something, I'm very eager to show it to somebody else, and so their way is faster, better, shorter. So that's what I do. And then when now I have it, I and then migrated from Instagram to Telegram. I have a channel, about 20,000 readers. A lot of them, when you look at the readership, are female and are or men, but mostly female, and are, say, 15 to 45 years old. So a lot of them just are a step behind me or before me in life, like they are where I was 10 years ago. So not only I try to write about what I learned, every little thing that I learned, but I also, for example, the past two years, I have very intentionally dedicated a couple of hours of my Fridays, and I make myself available for any kind of, I call them consultation, but it's like a mentorship, brainstorming hour. And they're always booked. I say booked because they're just, I have to put it in the book. Not that I get paid for, but it's like weeks in advance. And these are from my readers. So I have this basically a two-way conversation of, they know how I think, but if they think I can help them even more, they have a way to reach out to me. And recently I started the YouTube channel because I was like, okay, I write these small pieces, but then in a video I can compound several of them into one and show people how to think through it. So as I go through life, everything that I learn is available to others through me. And then similarly, a small act is like when I come to work every day, I'm very tuned into my coworkers. I really, beyond the job description, I'm always thinking about is, can I make the person to my right and to my left a little bit more successful, or a little bit happier, or a little bit feel more appreciated? We're all in it together. Nobody has a perfect job, but we are in life together. And it's always in the back of my mind. So I'm very tuned into my people around me. I'm very, very interested in people, really. And lifting them up. So that's it. I mean, there's nothing big about it, but it's consistently happening, and that's what makes me happy.
It's the intention and the consistency that contributes towards your sense of peace and your definition of success, right?
Yes, feeling connected. Yes.
Okay. Now, there's something I wanted to quickly rewind back to. You're talking about this idea of when I'm not being challenged, I'm out of balance, and then I've got to find ways to challenge myself, right? Like a new role or a new project or something on those lines. Is it the same the other way around, as in when you feel too challenged, you're not at balance as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's been times that that I was too challenged in one area, say work, and I had to dial back in other ways, or accept that it's out of balance for a while. For example, if work is challenging, I double down. I'm intentional about the time with my daughter because she's very young. But yes, the social life could suffer. So yes, and it's I think it's doable in shortest amount of time. But overall, if you continue long and long, I don't think it's doable. But I am a fairly ambitious person at work. I got a very good advice from a coach, if I may share. And he talked about diversifying my identity diversification is what he called it. And he asked me once, is like, Pantea, if tomorrow you don't have your job anymore, how much of your identity is a danger? Like, you can't define yourself anymore. And I was like, well, actually, fair amount. And he said, I'm not saying that your work shouldn't be important to you, but you should have enough other things in life that is also important to you. So once your identity is not as dependent on work. I think that's a good advice. And I work in the insurance industry, so I understand the value of diversification. But I never thought about it in identity, and I think it's a good point. And that brings balance too.
How do you track that? How do you make sure that you're keeping on track with having all of these different areas, both the amount of time you're spending in each of them, as well as how challenged or under challenged you are in each of them in line, so that you overall feel that sense of balance?
I first of all, I think I'm not perfectionist about it. So if the average is fine, then it's fine. And sometimes one is up, one is down. Because if you want to be perfectionist about a balanced life, that it in itself is an unbalanced approach, right? Because it never happens. And also not from a quantitative perspective, because for sure the number of hours I spend at work outpaces anything else. It's just the fact of life. I'm out work a lot of times. But for example, what happened organically post-COVID or during COVID, I was one of those people that I never even wanted to work from home. Like, I worked better at work. But then I was forced to be home in this desk that I inherited actually from my husband. He got himself a new one. And then I got this desk, and day after day at 3:15 or 3:30, when my little girl was coming home, I was home. And those 15 minutes that I had to hear everything firsthand is precious. And now I've gotten used to it. So I kind of like it. There's this new balance that, and also the team is in Europe. So I have really early morning meetings, but I started to appreciate being at home. But I also started at some point last year, intentionally, even if I didn't have to, start going back to work once in a while, because I realized that my mental health, being in the same room day in, day out, it's not serving me. I'm literally going crazy. So I started doing that as well. So I think it's like more qualitative approach, that being work. Like on weekends, have I seen my friend recently? If not, I'll make the effort to go say hi 1 hour. But I don't aim for a perfect girls' night out, because that might never happen, or it might be too much planning. But I can drive for just for 1 hour of like sitting together and have a cup of coffee. I try to do that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I try to be self-observant and self-aware about what's going on inside me, and prioritize taking care of it while not being perfectionist about it. So
you just want to make sure it doesn't get too bad. You've kind of just, what I'm hearing you describe yourself as, in you've got this kind of threshold,
yeah.
and you're like, anywhere within that kind of, like, you've got a lot of people drive on a freeway. They're like, no, I've got this exact lane. I've got to stay exactly this far from the right and
I
this far from the
can.
left. And you're like, I've got this whole lane, and as long as I'm within the lane, then it's all good. I'm
I
feeling good.
think I'm a believer of philosophy that in most things in life, most times in life, good enough is indeed good enough. And a lot of different things that are good enough on average, and a few areas that you excel once in a while, performs better in the long run.
So tell me more about that concept of how can you be good enough and
Mm-hmm.
outperforming at the same time? A lot of people struggle with that idea. They're like, no, I've got to outperform everything in order to do really well, as opposed to, I can't just accept good enough. As soon as I lower my standards, then I'm just not going to be good enough. How do you describe that to people?
I think you have to separate the concept of success from life satisfaction and define them separately. I think success is defined by external measures, right? Anything that the society can observe, they'll define a measure of success. Whether you like it or not, first of all, they'll measure you. so your education, your title, how well your child's grades are, and your marriage, your wealth, anything that is observable externally isn't a measure of success. And that measure of success is continuously in our space, right? Whereas life satisfaction, I think to some extent, up to a level, they are parallel, they work together. But after a while, satisfaction is something that one person can define for themselves. Now, what do I mean by that is that you have to define, instead of your maximums, I think in life you have to define your minimums. Like, what is the minimum amount of money that I'm going to be happy with? For example, I want to make sure I'm financially independent. Like, I have to make enough money that, God forbid, if something happens to my husband, I still can provide for my daughter, right? I want her in life I don't want to have to dwell over money if I want to sign her up for a class or she asks for a toy or something. I want to be able to support my extended family if something comes up. We have money for emergency, which are not little amount of money, what I'm talking about. But it's a combination of you have a good job, you make good money, you're also wise with your money. But then at some point you can reach all of these, right? Now, beyond this point, whether I want the latest car, the fanciest car, the biggest house, do I want a $4 million house or you know what I mean? Like, it's at some point you have to decide if happiness at some point is a choice. Then you have to decide, this is my minimum and I'm not going to move this every day and I'm going to be happy after this. And then beyond that. So that's what I mean, that good enough is good enough, that to define your minimums and be very clear about what your minimums are. Now, my minimums requirements when it comes to my daughter's needs are a lot higher, but my minimum, for example, definition of caring for my daughter is that I don't have to take her to classes. I have at age 11, we call her a nanny. She's not a nanny. She is a house manager, really. I don't have to do my own home's grocery shopping. I have no emotional tie of taking my daughter to classes myself. I even can ask her nanny to take her to like routine checkups once in a while. So in those moments, I don't have to be there. But the 6 to 8 p.m., where it's time to talk to her, understand her needs, and tuck her in bed, it's very important to me. Or if she needs help at school, I have to be there. So that's what I mean by good enough is good enough in most of the times of the day, but then you have to really be there when it's needed. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. You're kind of saying this area of my life needs a certain amount of focus, and this is the amount that I can guarantee that I'll always provide for that particular focus. So I can always give my daughter 6 to 8 p.m. I can always make sure that I even don't go to work for a day if she's needed, if I'm needed at school, or in those times that the house manager isn't available or she's sick or whatever, and I've got to take my daughter to school, I'm there. I'm able to do it.
Yeah.
But those aren't the norms. The norms are 6 to 8 p.m. and that's always going to happen. Everything else, that can, that just needs to happen somehow, whatever. It doesn't matter who does it or when it's done or whatever, but the 6 to 8 p.m. I'm there, or at least for a part of it, at least most of the time.
That's true. And I think I do want to refer, because James Clear in Atomic Habits says a really good thing. He says you don't rise to the level of your aspirations, you fall to the level of your systems.
Yes.
And I think at home and at work, at work when we have a really good team who's very high performing and they work together really well, that's a system in place that works really well, which thankfully we do have it at work. And at home also the same thing. You put systems in place that are kind of like working on an everyday basis. You know how things are going, but you don't have to be in every task that is getting done. But you also have to be humble enough to let go, to be honest with you. And there's a level of that 80% is fine, and there's a bigger picture that I'm part of, but I'm going to let go of control.
What's an example of that?
Like I said, okay, grocery shopping is done. It's maybe some things are not done the way I was going to do it, but that's okay. It's still a potato. Maybe it's not the brand of potato I would buy, but and if it's not done this time perfectly, believe in people's ability to progress. You sit down, you give feedback at work or at home. You give feedback, and also it is on me to give clear. Not I don't want to say instructions, but there is a you have to tell people what you want, right? And if there's a practice of that, so you tell people what you want, and then you let them try it. You sit back and you let it happen, and then you give feedback. You allow the system to grow and get better. But you have to be patient and humble for doing that.
Okay, let's circle back to it because that we're going to be talking about leadership, right? But as
Yeah.
we're before we dive into your journey, I just want to make sure I understand your definition of like your definition of success really well, because you've referenced that most people talk about success or identify your success based on what's external, right?
Yeah.
The career you have, or how much money, or how nice your car is, or your house, or whatever. Those how well your kid's doing at school, those types of things.
Yeah.
And you're referencing something which to you is much more of a internal. You spoke about as life satisfaction, but you also referenced it as peace. And that sense of peace comes from the balance that you have in your life. And then the balance, or this idea of balance, is being challenged the right amount so that you're still growing, but it's on par with the level of your capabilities. And
Yeah.
so,
Exactly.
and when I was asking you how you measure that or how you know that you're actually on track to it, you're saying you just have enough self-awareness. Do you have any systems around, because you fall to level your systems, right? Do you have any
Hmm.
systems around making sure that you're on track toward, or that you're within that threshold of peaceful balance and appropriate level of challenge?
I think one of them is my husband. The other one is my boss. Probably the two people in my life that give me feedback. Um, uh, I think I mean balance is an internal internal sense. So I can't say I have, but I do have people who hold me accountable externally. Like I have jokingly say, my husband, definitely, my boss is another one at work, and my coworkers. Um, but I don't want to give the impression that I am above materialistic needs. That is definitely not the case. I just think that I've and this is a definition of success, that I have made enough that I can afford not to care about it as much. But that I have defined probably below a lot of other people. So I at some point it's an intentional choice that okay, this is enough. I can start not to care as much about it. And that to me is a successful life, because just affording that choice, not a lot of people can do, right?
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's dive into your journey. You can start wherever you want to. I'm guessing we're going to start back in Iran. But where did your journey start, and how did you get to where you are today?
So I guess Iran is a good choice. I was born 78. That's the year the revolution happened in Iran. I am a couple of months older than the revolution. And then I did my bachelor's degree in Iran and civil engineering actually. And then I came to United States for my master's and PhD. I actually did my PhD only because my dad wouldn't let go of the topic of like I have to, and that's a classic, like that part of the world. Education is extremely highly valued. Um, and then I started working in the U.S. Started life in California. I met my husband when we were both in grad school, but then he was in New Jersey and I was in California, and then eventually moved to California. We got married in 2010, and my daughter was born in 2012. I work in insurance industry. I think there's a saying in insurance industry that most people fall into the industry. They nobody says I grow up I want to be in insurance industry. Um, but I like it. I think it's a very multidisciplinary area. It's a very necessary industry. It's not as sexy, but it's very necessary. Um, yeah, and currently we live in Chicago. That's a high
Okay.
level summary.
How did what happened, without this becoming a therapy session, obviously? How did that uh, upbringing in obviously a huge amount of change and probably a huge amount of stress for a lot of people
Yeah.
in Iran as well. How did that influence a lot of the decisions of what you've done, which have led you to where you are?
A lot. Because as you said, I think to this day, I'm an American citizen, and I go for business trips to Europe, and I cannot believe the power of American passport. After so many years of being citizen and 22 years in America, I still am not used to the fact that I can just show up to a country with a passport in my hand and no visa requirement. That's the level of the level of I don't know, fighting that you get used to when you're from a country like Iran, especially if you're a woman. I think I think when you come out of it for years, it takes time to take off the armor and get used to the fact that sometimes it's not, you can take it off, you can hang it on the wall, and you can live your life. It takes a few years to even observe that you're used to constantly wearing an armor and be aware of your surroundings all the time, because the life is hard. I think it's even harder now than when I was a kid because of the economic sanctions and that are crippling the economy. I grew up at the time of war, but I believe it's even harder now than it was at the time of war. But as a woman, you also have your own challenges because of the law of the land being a lot of times not fair towards women. So it's really hard. Like I said, the first time I got a position that I entered the room, I was the head of risk management, part of the regional executive team, and I couldn't believe it's me, and then everybody else at the table was American, and I was like, wow. So it's very humbling, and I think it takes you some time to get used to taking off the armor. But if you kind of like go through it, it brings you a deep sense of empathy and appreciation. That then it's a treasure to carry with you every time you show up to life, because you know it could be very different, and not everybody have it as good as you have.
So this idea of taking off the armor, can you dive into that? What type of armor did you have on when you moved from Iran to the US? And what does it look like to take it off and to have it up as well?
There are two levels to that. First of all, is every Iranian kid learns very early on that they have to study really hard and work really hard, because the competition is high, and the quote unquote mistakes can cost a lot of opportunities, because the opportunities are not as vast as an economy like United States would provide, right? So you have to have the best grades. You have to study really well. You really, truly do have probably to be the doctor or engineer, or not even lawyer, doctor and engineer. I don't know what major is really money making now, but like you're constantly living in this competition that is not just to look good. Is sometimes it is this real survival game that you have to play. Then as a woman, I mean, the law is against you. This compulsory hijab is against you. You learn, you have to, you continuously since very a young age, you're given the message that you have to shrink yourself to not be seen, because your very presence could be the source of sin to somebody. And it's not something, it is a politicized religious message that is now perpetuated by the government. But it is a message. As a 9-year-old, you don't have the mental, cognitive capacity to separate politics from, I don't know what your principal says in the school, right? I mean, the segregation that happens, the message you get as a woman, and then also, honestly, it's like you bump into limits all the time. I remember when I came to United States in grad school, maybe it was year 2, 3, I don't remember. All of a sudden, I realized Because in Iran, as a woman, and a fantastic example of it is the movement of women like freedom that happened. But like women in Iran have been fighting for the rights for the past 40 something years, if not beyond that. So in Iran, as a woman, you're constantly thinking about how to fight sexism, right? In addition to economic problems that everybody might have. But I realized when I came to the United States at 3 that I have become what I despise the most. Meaning that when I sit next to an American woman, they think about themselves, like an American grad student, they think about themselves first as a person and second as a woman. They don't think through everything as a woman. And I first think as a woman, and then it's like when you have the ceiling over your head and all your life you're bending yourself not to hit it because you know it's there. You're all of a sudden the ceiling is gone, but you've gotten used to like hunching all the time. And I remember it was so painful that I came home and I cried and I cried and I cried because I realized that I have internalized something that I hated so much. And so that's when maybe the moment that you realize that for the first time that you're wearing an armor that has become one with your skin. And now you have to like start taking it off. And then eventually maybe you can have, you can always wear it. You have it. It's in your toolbox, but then you can get a choice of not wearing it sometimes.
Okay. And what happened for you when you started taking it off? And it sounds like a very gradual journey.
It is. It is a
Yeah.
very gradual journey. Oh God, it's years of. I mean, it's a very layered experience. It's from how you think about your capacities, how you have confidence, how you even feel about your body because it's been covered all the time. Like you don't even know how to how to be. I don't know, like. I mean, now it's better again. I hope, but it's like if we didn't have social media either, right? You're discovering your womanhood. It's like a lot of layers of things that you discover about yourself. Up until honestly, this past year, I had a coach that tell me, and I'm like in my current position, right? I presumably I'm successful, but he was like, you have confidence issues. 2 years ago, I was still giving because confidence is a layered experience, right? And you take a layer and then you're good and then you discover another layer that you have to take off. So it's been a journey of growth and it's been painful at some points. Yeah, it's been really, really hard at some point. And it's hard because, not everybody's going through it, right? Not everybody has to, like a lot of kids who grow up in a more affluent, that didn't go through wars, through sanctions, through any of these and don't live in dictatorship. Governments didn't have to go through it. And once you come out, you actually see that. And it kind of makes, you go through a time that makes you angry. That why my people or we have to go through it. It's just a lot of complex emotions that come and go through the years.
Now, a lot of people listening to this, maybe they haven't been in such extreme situations as you, or maybe even more extreme. Most probably not having to deal with as much, right? And they're hearing you say, you've got to take off the armor. It's lots of layers. It's hard work. It's really painful. It can make you angry. It can make you very sad. It can make you question why you're even bothering doing it at all. And they're hearing you say this, okay, this sounds worthwhile. Like it sounds like this is the right type of thing I should do. It's important for my growth. It's important for me to become who I want to be. And then they're saying, Hunter, how can I do that? Help me. Like what can I do to help take off my own armor, my own layers?
I would say start from whatever is most available to you. So like, I give a small example. And it's not related to the answer, but I was my PhD took long. It took about 6 years, and my younger sister actually, and then at that point you're like, I don't know if I have to finish this or I have to quit or go get a job and things like that, and then which are all hard life questions. I think that's why somehow it's related. And then she told me, if you have several doors in front of you and all of them are closed and you don't know behind any of them what's going to happen, you just know you don't want to be here anymore. Just open whatever door you can and go through it. Just start moving. So if you want to take the armor off, whatever piece you can take off, just take off. Even if it's like a little one. Just whatever you can take off, that will give you the next action. And that's actually an approach I have, which is something I learned towards late 30s, and I wish I had learned my early 20s, is that when you're really, really stuck in a dark room and you don't know what to do, and instead of trying to have a long-term plan of this would never happen again and what am I gonna do in life, just actually do the exact opposite. Pause. Really, truly pause. Pause. And then ask yourself, what's the next best thing? What's the next best step? And just do that step. And then once you get to the new point, just ask, what's the next best step? And then just do that. And then keep going step by step until you have more data to make new decisions, right? I think that's how to do it.
Okay. And the purpose behind doing it, what's that for you?
For me in life,
Yeah.
or
What's the
taking the armor?
purpose? What's the purpose for you in your life of taking off the armor?
Because I deserve it. I deserve to feel peace, and I deserve to feel happy sometimes.
Yeah.
I really think that's it.
And what I'm loving about what you're saying, or what's resonating very strong with me, is that it's your choice to feel peace and it's your choice to feel happy. And a lot of people feel like it's their circumstances that control whether they can feel happy or peaceful or sad, right?
It's both. I don't want to sound privileged. Like I really want to contextualize it, because I am from yes, I'm from Iran, but I also am from a family that from all the hardships and everything they went through, they were highly educated and they prioritized their kids. We all have our shortcomings as parents, but those are the two factors that definitely I had in my life. And so they gave me everything they could, all me and my sisters. And then I am in the United States. I am a highly educated person. I do have a successful job. I make enough money and I have a really good husband. All of these are not, first of all, there's a generational act of service that I believe in, that my parents did for me and I do for my daughter. But I also don't want to make it as if like anybody can wake up and all of a sudden decide to be happy. But I'm also a firm believer that a lot of it, as an adult, is a choice that at some point you have to make in life to be happy. So I think there is a context of where we stand, but then there is also an element of choice of how I want to look at things and how much I want to make that choice. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes sense. It's a choice
Okay.
that yeah, no, it makes sense. If I feed it back to you, you can tell me if I've understood you correctly.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a kid and when you're kind of just growing up, most of the things which happen around you are happening to you. You don't have that much. You don't even have the cognitive capacity to really be able to decide what you want for your life. And when you start to get older and you become an adult, well, you can't keep blaming your environment. You can't keep blaming your parents or your spouse or your kids or whatever. It really comes down to you. And it's your choice as to what you do. And some people might have faced huge, extraordinary challenges, but at the end of the day, it's still up to them what they do and what actions they take and how they live their lives. And you need to start with just baby steps. You can't just suddenly go from one day miserable, depressed, anxious, and suicidal, and then just suddenly be like, I'm happy and I feel amazing. It's got to be gradual steps, and you just start with whatever the next best thing is, whatever feels capable, and whatever challenges you just enough to be able to prove that you do have the capability to be challenged a bit more. Is that right?
Yes, it's almost, because what I want to say, like, you never yes, when you become an adult, what you say about your parents and your circumstances that you come from are still valid, are still all valid points. It's not like if you bring it up, you're necessarily blaming it. It's just, if I want to summarize it, life satisfaction in adulthood is a skill set. It's a skill set that we all have to learn. And acknowledging that fact helps. You might not be happy all the time, but you could still experience joy. And it's a skill set to learn as an adult, like everything else. And if you prioritize that among with everything else, then little by little baby steps you get to experience it. But it's never, I don't think it will happen that one day you will wake up and you will be happy. And if as an adult, you're waiting for that day, it may never come. That's, I think, the summary.
That explained it perfectly. Don't wait
Okay,
for
good.
don't wait for other people to be able to make you happy or help you enjoy life more or have more joy. You have to take some element of responsibility into your own hands.
Yes.
Of what you're doing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. Let's progress to talking about what you started referring to, which was leadership. But a specific question for you actually is that you manage teams and you've raised your daughter, and from from what we've spoken about and from what I've seen you post online as well, you're very proud about both of those. What have you learned throughout these journeys?
I've learned that humans are all the same, regardless of the size of their body. So that's really
What do you mean by that?
Meaning that you can't, if you respect a child as much as you respect an adult, they will become respectable people. They will be raised respectable people. And if you're tuned into the needs of your team as much as you tune into the needs of your child, you will figure out what they need, and you will be a good manager. And that's what I mean. Like, it's not just because set of humans are bigger or older than the others. I mean, you have to tailor the message. Obviously, you can have an adult conversation. Some things are not age. But I think at the fundamental level, humans are humans, and you approach every interaction with dignity, respect, and interest and curiosity. I think it works really well.
And so, what are some of the ways you do that with your teams? And then we'll ask some examples of how you did that with your daughter as well.
Okay. So one of the things I do is that I think it's a privilege to manage somebody because you can really have profound impact on their life. What I do always, for example, when I start working with somebody is like, I want you to always have many, many options to lead this team. And the way I manage you is I'm always preparing you for your next job. And then I hope you stay with me, because then you will be happy and you will be a really high performer. And I'm continuously asking about their professional development. Like, what are their goals? Like, what are they need? And then I try to make sure that I tie in their assignments to that professional goal, mindful that they're with me a few years, they're my guest a few years, and then they're going to move on. On daily basis, like I said, I'm tuned into, does she feel upset? Does he look unhappy? Like, I make sure you just ask, how are you doing? Are you okay? Just non-work conversations of like making sure this human that I'm working with is okay, regardless of their position or job description. And I honestly try to ask for feedback once in a while. Honest feedback. But I only ask it when I truly have time to listen, because I don't want to be a lip service. So if I have 10 good minutes or 15 good minutes, I'll be like, do you have any feedback for me? Is there anything I can do better? And I just stop talking after that to let people. And I also follow up.
I was going to ask, what's been some of the best feedback you've had that you've really taken to heart?
Honestly, one of the very surprising feedbacks I got is that don't cancel the one-on-ones on weekly basis. And it came from one of my smartest people. And I like, those independent ones that you have that you're like, he doesn't even need me. Like, he's like a jet fighter, right? But he's like, no, this little the act of conversation that we have about priorities actually helps. And no matter what, I try to make that sure that that one-on-one happens. I think just allowing the conversation to organically happen all the time prevents issues to become big issues.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like keeping your finger on the pulse, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you were about to say what you do with that type of feedback, right? You're saying you don't want to just have lip service. You want to listen properly, at least 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
you circle back around.
I circle back if it's something that I have to follow up on. Otherwise, I'll make sure I act on it. Or if I cannot act on it, I'll go back and explain why I couldn't do something. It's only respectful to do that. So I try to be very respectful about the feedback I get.
Okay. And you made a quick reference that obviously you change it based on the person's skill level, capability, their level of maturity, which happens within teams, but then also for your daughter as well, right?
Yes.
Doing this type of thing with an 11-year-old is different to doing it with a 6 or a 4-year-old.
Yes.
How do you adapt it for your daughter?
As years go by,
Yeah. Or just
uh,
how do you communicate differently with your daughter compared to with your team or other people that you're trying to lead and help?
um, I try to refrain from unsolicited advice with my daughter. I think one method that has helped a lot, both in my social media approach and with my daughter, is I try to talk about my experience and say what worked for me, or as a kid, I experienced the same thing. Um, and also, I think this holds for everybody, daughter and teen, is that I provide a safe environment to make mistakes. I I try to be a coach, not a parent or a manager, because I think a coach is a person. The difference between a coach and a manager, I think, is the element of care. When feedback is given with care, then that's a coach's feedback, right? But otherwise, if you just give feedback without you being invested in it, you being in the ring with the person, you're like, okay, together we're gonna figure out how we're gonna fix this, and I'm there with you until this is fixed. And if need be, I'm gonna cancel everything else and dedicate 10 times more time that it needs. That's a level of care, that you're invested in that person's success and you're there with them in that journey. And I think that's the difference between a parent as a coach or a manager as a coach, or just doing it by the book. And that I think has made the difference.
So there are plenty of things that as parents we want our kids to do, and we usually always want them to be a bit more advanced or a little bit ahead of where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some examples of how you be a parent as a coach versus a parent as a manager that have worked really well for you?
Okay, so my daughter struggled with math last year. She had a fantastic teacher who was really pushing them. And because he was really fantastic pushing them, not all grades were coming home as like top grades. And she basically, at the beginning, was not telling me the grades instantly. And then one night she told me, and I was like, and then she saw that I didn't get mad. I didn't have to say it. She saw that I didn't get mad. That's first. You have to deliver on your promise, right? So I truly didn't get mad. And I sat with her and we tried together. So instead of me telling her, oh, I'm going to sign you up for this, or I'm going to sign you up with that, I was like, okay, let's try it this way. For example, getting you a tutor, right? And then you do 2 sessions and you tell me if this works. And then when she said it doesn't work, I stopped it. And then we tried another way and another way. And then because for me, it was very important because what I observed as a parent is that she's hesitant and this was an observation in a broader perspective, not just the math, that she's hesitant to set goals and announce them. Like, I want to reach X, right? So I knew that, and I was like, I helped her announce goals. And so I identified some skill sets that she doesn't have in my head. And then I worked with her one by one. I was like, for example, asking for help on time is a skill set. So, and I told her some memories about like when she was a kid and didn't ask for help. And then, so that was a skill set we talked about. And then of course we sat and worked on math because you have to do it. But then the goal setting, the announcing the goal, and then striving for that. So for example, she says, I want to get a grade A. And then a grade A means that you have to get 3 A's and no more than 1 B along the way, right? So when you allow yourself to set a goal, then you start measuring yourself against that goal. And sometimes you fall short against that goal. And then I remember specifically we sat at the kitchen table and the A was almost not possible based on the grade so far. And this is a 5th grader we're talking about. And I asked her, Manisha, what do you want to do? I mean, there's this one more quiz or test that you have. You can give it everything, or you and what she said stuck with me. And this is after months and months of working together. She said, if I don't try, my future self will be not happy with my present self. And then so she was like, so I'm going to try, even though the probability was a slim of making the A, and then she eventually made the A. And to me, that's parenting as a coach. It took months. I had to deprioritize many things. But I was there with her along the way. But the way I viewed it, that this person in front of me lacks certain skills. This is just the byproduct of it. And I have to make sure she understands those. And then at the end of it, when she got the A, or to me, she was successful, but she also had the A to prove to herself that she got it. I basically drew a chart for her of how Manisha showed leadership. And I wrote all these skills and I said, Manisha set the goal, and Manisha communicated her goal, and Manisha gathered all of her resources. And then Manisha continuously measured herself against that goal. And so those are the skill sets of a leader, and that she will carry beyond math. And that's a good example for me of parenting as a coach. Just like have the whole person in mind of what you want her to be 20 years from now.
Okay. And I guess one of the differences between doing that for your daughter versus doing it for one of your employees is that you have less responsibility for your employees, right? Like you're less invested. If your employee really wants to grow or become more of a leader or enhance their skill sets, then you're all in for it with them, right? They've got to give their all and they've got to stay with you, right? But you're not gonna put everything else on hold for a few months just to help one employee as you would your daughter, right?
Well, first of all, they're adults, so it will be an intrusion to their privacy, right?
Yeah, of course.
But if they come to me and they ask for help, I will probably, I don't know if I'm going to put everything else on hold, but I will double down in helping them, being mindful that they're full-grown adults. And I will, for an adult, I will follow their lead, right? I'll come and help as much as they want me to help, but I'll be there so they know they can count on me. And I'm, like I said, I do believe that I have to give people the feedback they need to hear, not what they want to hear, because that's an act of a coach, it's a caring act, but you have to do it from a position of care. Otherwise, it's brutal, right? It's cruel if there's no care in it. Honesty without care is cruel sometimes. But then you also have to be with them in reaching that goal and breaking it into small steps and helping them get there. But I'll follow their lead because they're adults, and I'll intrude otherwise.
And speaking about raising children, I remember a post. I think this is when we connected, when I saw you write the post. Then we started chatting.
Yeah.
And you said that every day you ask her, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? I wrote it down here. What was the so-so part of your day?
Yeah.
And once you even shared with your 9-year-old, you had a task that you were scared of because it was really complex. So she gave
Hmm.
you, she handwrote a note to you in the morning, right? This was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, and the quote was, just get out and do it. Once you've done it, it's so satisfying. You'll always fear it till you do it.
Yeah. That's
You're,
exactly
you're,
it.
ma-
And I
yeah.
remember it very, very. I was shocked that she said it, but I was very happy, of course, as a parent. And she was right. I did it, and actually 3 years later, the task was. I think it was the designing a whole day, strategy of data and analytics, and I had just started, and it's now satisfying looking back. So it happened.
But extra
So she
satisfying,
was
right?
right.
Because especially when your
Yeah.
daughter's telling you to do it. Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
why do you believe that she came to that conclusion? Why do you believe that she came to the conclusion of saying, uh, you'll always fear it till you do it, just go and do it? How did, like, was she just trying to feed back to you what she often heard you say to her? Was this something she had more internalized and she just thought that she was the one saying it? A lot of people, a lot of parents, a lot of mothers and fathers
Hmm.
would hear that and they'll be like, "That's amazing! Like, I wish my child would do more of that, would take more of that in." What do
Yeah.
you attribute that towards?
It's interesting actually because age 9 um, was before this math story, right?
Right.
So I really think she was more at the scale of her life. She was more maybe repeating what I was telling her. But then I walked her through an example of it the following year with her. So sometimes maybe it's also in school that you know the theory, but you don't know the practice. So like you actually don't know how to do it. But I honestly think at age 9, she kind of knew what are the values at home and how we operate at a theoretical level, right? Um, Getting to learn it and live it is probably years to come as a teenager. Um, so I think it's more observing of what me and my husband live by, and then mirroring it back,
And I'm
which is
guessing,
still good. I mean, as a parent, still I'm
mm,
happy with it very much.
awesome.
I mean, it's not what she observes. That's still a good win.
And I mean, I can only imagine how you would have felt if she had said that to you and then you
Hmm.
didn't follow through with it, and then you would have been teaching her all these values that you're espousing as just lip service, right? That would have been very motivating for you to have read that note.
Yeah. No, she's watching. She's watching very, very carefully. And I think kids really do. I mean, and I think what I observe in her that she also thinks fairly highly of herself. I mean, don't get me wrong. She has her challenges. We all have the confidence, and definitely she's not an exception. But in some glimpse of a future, I hope she's like, I was applying for something that was a big deal to me, and she was like, "Can I write you a recommendation letter?" And I'm like, I guess I can submit it as part of the application. And she went and typed the whole recommendation letter and I put it on the wall. So when I need an internal recommendation letter, I read that. So I think, I think as she's growing up, she also, I think the way I speak to her is more like a equal, age appropriate, but equal. So um, I don't speak down to her. I never spoke down to her. Even when she was little, my husband and I are a firm believer that just because a child is smaller doesn't mean they're less. Um, and I think that's what I'm seeing in these notes and recommendation letters, that she mirrors back the same level of communication as she probably hears from me, that I speak to her as a full person.
From your perspective, how do you balance that with your daughter still respecting that you're the adult, you're still making the ultimate decision, you and your husband are still making the ultimate decisions in your life and in what you're doing? How do you balance those two things? Treat them like an adult, but they're not still like treat them as equal, but they're not still equal, right?
Yeah, and exactly what you said. I treat them as equal, but not as adults. Those are two different things.
Mhm.
I learned about these three styles of parenting, and one of them I think is authoritarian. I can't say the English word, but like you set standards, but you have a two-way communication, as opposed to you're like, this is my standards, and because I said so, you're going to do it. And then the third one is passive, or that you just like let the child be, and you don't set any standards. But you set the high standards, but you keep the channels of communication open, and that's what I mean by like I set the rules. It's actually my parenting responsibility to set the rules. And that is another thing I learned around age 3. That's when the parenting really starts, in my opinion, because age 1 and 2, your job is to kind of keep them alive. And then 3 is when you're like, oh, they actually have a personality and what I do matters. And so I realized that she had iPad in her hand. And when I sit on the other side of the room and I keep saying, Manisha, stop, Manisha, don't do it. Manisha, you said you're going to do it. Well, I'm putting the responsibility of me executing my rules on this child's shoulder. I have to, your no means you should follow through. You should get up and take the iPad and provide another alternative. The iPad time is over. Do you want to draw or do you want to play? And that's when I kind of internalized that it is my job to make decisions, and it is my job to take the responsibility of making decisions. And but then I'm very careful about not all decisions are created equal, right? Some are really important and firm, and a lot of them, depending on the child's age, are up for negotiation. If there's a good reason, we can change them. And I think but I don't delegate the responsibility to her for making decisions. That's purely me and my husband. And I think she understands that. It's very clear in the house.
At what stage do you start letting her just make the decisions herself? Or what? So not just the decisions, but even just taking more responsibility and personal responsibility. At what stage do you start to transfer
Let me
that
give you an
over?
example, because yeah, okay, that's a fair question. Because it might, so for example, in her own life's autonomy, in her own life, she has a lot of autonomy. I don't even know when she does her homework at this point, to be honest with you. She just does it. Tidying up her room is her full responsibility. I don't know. So within her life, those are all her decisions and her responsibilities, and I don't intrude on day-to-day things, right? But the decision of not having a phone is our decision. And it is our, so, but then we sit down, be like, okay, you need to have some tech. So you're going to have alternative technology that is just not as intrusive mentally and emotionally. So you can have a game computer, and you can have a smartwatch, which is taken, like the school forces them to put it in the cubby, but you're not going to have a phone. And I don't say you're not going to have a phone for a reason. I say you're not going to have a phone until age of 14, because Manisha, having a phone means that people outside have unsupervised access to you through internet. And look around in your life, everywhere you go, there is an adult with you, right? You're always supervised and protected. In the state of Illinois, the age to do summer job is 14, which means that that's the age that people on average think you're mature enough that you can go out in the world on your own, do a summer job, and manage yourself. And similarly, by that same logic, age of 14 will be when you get your phone, because that you can manage the stranger's access to you. So I provide a reason, but I stand with, like, my husband and I, of course, talked about it before this conversation. We were on the same page, and the reason is there. But we're not like 0-1 on tech. We were like, okay, we're not going to give the phone, but you can have a smartwatch and you can play games and things like that. So, but close the chat on the game.
Yeah, okay, close the chat again. Good. And then at some stage that will change, right? So when you were talking about cleaning up a room and doing her homework.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, you probably needed to be just as just as involved in that decision making, and she didn't have the self autonomy, there needed to be a transition from you going before you go to sleep, you have to clean up your room every single night or whatever it was, right? Um, how did you transition from you being the one making the decisions for her, or you being the two making the decisions for her,
Mm-hmm.
to then her having the autonomy for herself to make those decisions?
I generally joke that lazy moms raise very independent kids. And I think to some extent that's true, because I generally in life, if somebody can do something, I will give it to them. I always joke that if a child can pull up their own pants, you don't pull up their pants for them. And but then again, going back to what we discussed at the beginning, you can't be perfectionist about it. So a 3-year-old's definition of cleaning is organized piles of things, right? You should be at peace with that. And I am. I accept that definition of clean at age 3 is organized piles of things. So I think if you adjust your expectations to the capability and then grow with them, I think that is a good recipe for peace of mind and gradual growth. Whereas if I want to demand a really absolutely clean room, I still don't have it. So it is possible that you come to your room and to your standard, it's not clean, but to me it's clean because the bed is made, the clothes are mostly in the drawer, and everything is mostly where it should be. And to me, that's good enough.
Good enough.
So
Good
it is
enough is good
possible
enough.
to you, it might not be clean.
Right. So another question about parenting then
Mm-hmm.
is, um, you've spoken quite a bit around how your daughter, you want to make sure that your daughter is learning the values from home and then able to implement it, right? And she may very well listen to this one day, maybe not now, maybe when she has her own phone, when she's 14, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but what do you wish that your daughter would take away from your life journey, at least your life journey so far, and then how you hope to emulate it over the next 10, 15, 20 years as well? What do you wish your daughter would take away from that?
I want her to experience two things in life: the joy of working hard towards something and achieving it, but then also the joy of enjoying her day-to-day life. And if somehow like overall she thinks that mom was something like that, I think that would be fantastic. Example, what I want her to remember me by is that she really cared about me. Like I I hope that's what she remembers, that I really was her number one priority. Like maybe right after my husband, but like up there, like really, I was super important to her, and she really cared, and she really did her best. But for her life, I want her to be happy, but I also want her to experience joy of really hard work and achieving something that she thought is not possible. Because there's a lot of joy after that.
I can imagine. Uh, how much do you bring of your journey and of the journey you've gone through of peeling off the armor? And how much have you been able to share with her so far? How much do you think that she's actually capable of understanding now, but then also capable of understanding without ever having grown up in
Yeah,
slightly pre, during, and then post-revolution Iran? Different upbringing, right?
that's actually an interesting question. Um, she was younger. I'm going to tell this story, and then I'm going to conclude from it. Um, she was younger, and we were looking at a billboard. I honestly don't even remember. I think it was a woman and a tire, of like they were somehow trying to sell a car tire with a picture of a woman, typical advertisement. And then she's looking at it, and then she kind of like said something, and then I went on a monologue of like a minute about like how they should not use women to sell objects, and like, to her words, but like basically a feminist objectification of women is wrong monologue. And then somebody told me really interesting feedback, and that's actually through social media, because I said the story, and somebody said, do not put your glasses on your child's eyes. meaning that you were raised in a society where feminism was absolute. Like, feminism is important. I think it's still important, even for, especially in this day and age in America. But like, don't make your experiences a glass and put it on her child, because she might never experience the level of sexism you experience, and you have to let her lead you about how much you want to share about your life's journey and experiences. And I kind of internalize that as well, so I bring it up as it's related. However, one of the things I really, having said that, one of the things I really insisted from day one is that her learning my language, because I wanted her, the reason I said to myself is like, I wanted her to be able to form an independent opinion of what being Iranian is like and about, and not having to learn about the culture and her heritage through my language. And like, I tell her Iranian, say that. I want her to independently understand what Iranian say, do, like the media and everything. And that's the reason I've insisted that she learns my language. So she has the tools to form her opinion, and she has the tools to get to know her heritage. So that's super important to me. But I think a lot of what I experienced, she will never experience, thankfully. I hope. That's 3 generations have worked really hard for her to not have worry about that.
Yeah.
It's hard work, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you. What I'll do quickly is I think I'll summarize most of what I've heard you say. And I'll give you the chance to correct or add to or say something's completely wrong or tweak what I've shared, because I'm
Okay.
just feeding back from what I've heard from your journey, right? And we spoke mostly high level, right? We spoke mostly about ideas and concepts and things that you've learned, rather than necessarily like the specific things that have happened in your journey. But you were saying that success for you is basically when you're at peace, with yourself, especially, but at peace. And you've got this idea of balance, right? Your capabilities need to be on par with your responsibilities. You need to keep growing at certain times. Sometimes you can be a little bit more lax, but you got to push yourself at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you got to make sure that, because when you're not challenged enough, you're unbalanced. And when you're challenged too much, you're unbalanced as well. But
Yeah.
ultimately, you just got to protect the things which are most important. And so you reference the 6 to 8 p.m. with your daughter. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's an important thing. You got to protect that.
Yeah.
There are times where you won't be there for the full 6 to 8 p.m. But even when that happens, you're still going to be there for bedtime. Like, you're still going to tuck her in. You're still going to be
Yeah.
with her and talk to her about her day. That's always going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are things that you can kind of let slide, and you can delegate some other things as well. But at the end of the day, you've got to focus on what is most important and make sure that you prioritize that. And one of the things that's important to you as well, like always being in continuous service. So you've got these thousands of acts of micro kindness, but then you
Mm-hmm.
also give your time, like you spend quite a bit of time to share with your 20,000 followers on Telegram, and other people follow you
Mm-hmm.
on social media and the like. And you've got these
Mm-hmm.
other times where you just spend more time one on one with people to be able to
Mm-hmm.
talk with them and help them out.
Yeah.
And so you always want to make sure that you're giving to others, because that helps
Yes.
you feel more at peace and more balanced, like you're actually doing something which is good, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and then you were saying that you always want to make sure that you, like, even when you go to work, you just tune in with your coworkers. Can you make them a little bit happier, or a little bit more successful, or a little bit more appreciated? How can you just make someone's day just a little bit better, especially if they're
Mm-hmm.
upset? But even if they're not, just make it a little bit better, right? You shared
That's
something
right.
which was really cool, which was this idea that work can't be everything for you. Something that Coach shared with you, which is identity diversification. Is your
Mm-hmm.
work everything for you? Is being a mum everything for you? Is being a wife everything for you? Is being an Iranian immigrant everything for you? And then how
Yeah.
much of your life will still continue even if you lose one of those things?
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
We spoke about how perfectionism is a danger, and you could kind of just, we spoke about being in the lane, but like kind of this threshold, and you just got to be self-aware enough, and make sure that you continue to prioritize, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you spoke about this idea that success is external. Well, most people looking at your life talking about if you're successful is from a society's perspective external,
Yeah.
and life satisfaction is something which is more internal. And so instead of defining maximums in your life of how nice can my house be or how nice can my car be, and these are the maximum, this is what I want to get to, you'd rather just focus on defining your minimums, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a minimum is I don't want to have to worry about money if I'm buying a toy or technology or supporting extended family or whatever. And you want to make sure that you've got enough food on the table and there's nice food and food that you're happy with. But at some stage, how much money you spend doesn't actually improve your happiness. And you can kind of choose for yourself where that threshold, like where that level is. As in, is
Mm-hmm.
it up here where I'm going to be above that? I have to be happy, or is it a little bit lower down? I can still be happy from there, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean you're not going to pursue what's higher up. It just means that you're happy with what's not higher up, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and we discussed about how big of an impact growing up in Iran has had on you, both in terms of your identity as a woman, but also your level of freedom and using a US passport versus what it would be
Mm-hmm.
like trying to get around with an Iranian passport. Big difference,
Yeah.
right?
Big difference.
Huge. And you've been trying to find, and you've been your whole life, since adulthood, you've started realizing you can just start to take off the armor, right? And taking off the armor gives a really deep, humbling sense of appreciation. And you realize that you shared that the way that you do it is just looking at what's the next best thing. What's the next level of layer you can start to take off? You don't need to take off your whole layer around how much capacity you have, or your whole layer around your confidence, or your whole layer around your body image and being more
Mm-hmm.
free, or womanhood, or when things can be fair with other people, or your emotions. You don't need to take off whole layers at a time, right? It's
Yeah.
not a race to get undressed. It's just whatever little part that you're able to take off, just take off that, right?
And feel safe. Yeah. Whatever feels safe. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And you shared that it's simply because you deserve to feel peaceful and happy. You just deserve to have that. And that's the reason why you're taking it off. And that's your choice in the end. So you said life satisfaction is a skill set, and you said that you can learn, you can use a skill set to be able to experience joy without needing to be happy all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Against the whole
Yeah.
positive psychology type stuff, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
And then towards the end, you started sharing about how with teams versus like with adults versus your daughter and helping people, the humans are just humans, right? They'll
Mm-hmm.
rise to the level of respect that they're being treated, and that starts to inform the systems that they can eventually fall down onto, right? It improves their
Mm-hmm.
systems. And so you
Yeah.
approach all your interactions with dignity, respect, and curiosity. You just want to help people achieve what their goals are, help them define it, and then help them go towards the path towards it. Support them if they're struggling, ask for feedback, actually do the feedback that they've given you and let them know how you've done with it. Or if you're not able
Mm-hmm.
to do it, or if you want more thoughts or how you can keep doing better, because everyone around you can keep you more accountable. You gave the example of your boss and your husband, but as we're having the conversation, it sounds like you actually allow everyone to keep you accountable and everyone to
Yes.
continue to help you grow.
Yes.
Um,
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, and that's pretty much the most of it, right? Like we shared about how Manisha's taken a lot of the lessons from what you've shared, and she'll start kind of telling you and everyone that this is how she lives her life, and this is how you need to live your life. But there are still challenges to implementing something which you want to adopt
Yeah.
into your life. Adults have the same problem as kids, right?
I think
Manisha's
we do. Yeah.
your daughter's just lucky that she's been given the right ideals to work hard towards and to try to live her life up to, as opposed to living her life up to how nice her car is going to be, and then or how nice her house will be, and then living her whole life towards that. She's got better targets that she can try to adopt. But
I hope so.
at the end of the day, she can kind of espouse it, think of
Mm-hmm.
herself more highly, like she thinks of herself higher than what she actually is, and then she can
Yeah.
start acting in line towards being that higher level of herself. And as a result of believing that her capacity is higher, then her responsibility and what she chooses to do is going to be higher as well. Um,
That's a great, great summary. I do want to, as you were talking through it, I think for children, because you asked me how you do it, I think unconditional love as it provides that safety. That's, but you have to live it, not just say it. Like, you truly have to be the person that doesn't get angry or upset if they fail. And I think as a parent, it's really, really hard, because children are essentially, in a lot of ways, we see them as an extension of us, right? We can't, so it feels extremely personal when your child fails at something. And it becomes very hard to give them that unconditional love and a safe space to fail and try to reach for for a better self. So I think for us as parents, that is a very important point to think about. Like, are we giving truly unconditional love? And I think that's also a layered experience that we cannot achieve on first try, but it's an ideal to aspire to as a parent, to give unconditional love.
I like this
I don't.
idea of loving your children as much as you should love yourself, as opposed to as much as you do love
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, yes, yes, and also care, if I may, because only recently, like I'm 45, definitely past 40, I have started to understand this care as a value and as a life value. I mean, as a person, I think another thing that really helps you is it's like knowing your value system. And care is only something recently I came across that could be value. And for something I read in a parenting book is that it says we don't care because we love. We fall in love when we care. And I think one of the really quite essential examples is when we adopt, but also when we have pets, right? Or even, like, I don't know, plants, anything we care for, after a while we start loving them. And so I think it's a self-fulfilling evolution of care and love. And you kind of have to start the journey with yourself, as you brought up, and with your child. And as long as you're not intruding with everybody around you, you don't sacrifice. Care doesn't mean you self-sacrifice. It's also not selfish. So I don't care for others at the expense of not sacrificing myself. But also, like, you have to keep everybody in mind, including yourself. And then it will grow between care and love. And that safety is at the core of that. I think that psychological safety is at the core of it. But that's something I've only recently discovered in life. The power of care, real
Power
care.
of care. Yeah,
Yeah.
just doing the things that lead to the outcome that you're striving towards, rather than just expecting that the outcome's already there. But yeah, most people would just think, well, you either love something or you don't. No, you can create the care for it.
I wish it was that easy.
If only that was that easy. Um, okay, a final question for you then.
Mm-hmm.
Just before we wrap it all up, is people have been listening to this conversation for about an hour and 20 minutes or so, and they've heard you share a lot. They've heard some really interesting insights. They've heard me summarize and all of it. I want to make sure that people can take something away that they can very practically and tangibly do in their life as a result of
Mm-hmm.
listening to this hour 20, and make sure it's as valuable as it possibly can be. What would you encourage people to do as a result of listening to this? Their work commute's almost finished, or their run's almost finished, whatever it is. And they're thinking, okay, I've got to do something in my life now that's going to make my life better. Because just as we're literally just talking about, right? It's not just our life is better and we get to do these things. No, we do the
Mm-hmm.
things that make our life better. We care so that we can fall more in love. And what can people do in their life right now that will help them become more holistically successful, help them live a better life, and in your term, be more peaceful and more balanced?
I think self-care, honestly. But how I define self-care is not a skin routine or a manicure. I think self-care is, first of all, getting to know yourself. That would be your values, your value system, but also your beliefs, the glasses, the lens through which you see the world, your limitations, and your desires. And once you get to know those, then on daily basis, don't wait for happiness. Don't wait for loving yourself. Don't wait for loving everybody around you. Stop start caring for people and for yourself. And then love and joy follows care, not the other way around. And if you don't know where to start, you can lead with curiosity, because curiosity is a humbling emotion. It's a humble emotion by definition. Like curiosity by definition means I don't have all the answers. So just say, I wonder how I can care myself. I wonder what's going on inside me. Just take a pause, take a 5-minute pause, observe, and don't jump to conclusions. And I think start with care. I think get to know yourself and start with care. Like start caring for yourself and everybody around you, and see where that leads.
Beautiful. Thank you, Panta. I appreciate your time.
Of course. Absolutely. No, it was a pleasure. Great talk. Thank you. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
Question.
So I hope you received a whole lot of value from engaging in that conversation. What were the key takeaways for you? What can you schedule in your life right now to make sure that the time you just invested into listening to this exceptional conversation with this amazing mentor and this amazing individual is time that wasn't misused, but was time that you've allocated properly to enhancing your life and improving it? Whatever it is, schedule it now, practice it now, be the successful person you're meant to be, live with purpose.